All right. Thank you guys for joining. Welcome everyone. So this is first of many Twitter space. So Eigenfi is going to host a series Twitter space called MEV space. We will discuss MEV related topics. So please follow our Twitter and Substack and stay tuned for more. And I also like to announce that the second episode of MEV space is called An Offer Builders Can't Refuse: The Search Integration Saga. So we'll have top tier speakers discussing search and builder integration. Now let's get back to today's topic. So speaking of builder centralization, let's look at some data here. So at the moment, the top two builders have been consistently producing over 85% of all the blocks and more than 95% of the MEV boost blocks during most of this year. So in November, these two top builders has processed like 87% of all the private transactions and 79% of all public transactions. And they took 80% of the overall builder rewards, including priority fees and builder tips. So that's like 14.6K ETH worth of 45 million at the price of 3,100 USD dollars per Ethereum. And so people have been talking about like centralization for a long time, but yet still happens without being stopped. So today we have all this like all-star rooster, and I believe that we can inspire new and solid ideas to solve the current crisis. So next, I'd like to ask our speakers to do a brief introduction about themselves. So we have 7 speakers today, and so I'm going to ask them one by one to do self-introduction. Let's start from Professor Fan Zhang.
Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for having me. This is my first Twitter space. So I'm Fan. I'm currently an assistant professor at Yale. Before that, I was a postdoc. Sorry, I was not a post. I was a PhD student at Cornell. My advisor was Ari Jules. I worked mainly on security and applied cryptography with a focus on problems in decentralized systems such as blockchains. Yeah, and MEV is something I found particularly interesting because it spans not only security but also economics, and the solutions are often interdisciplinary as well. Yep, very, very happy to be here.
Okay, thank you. So the next one, Burek, please.
Hi, hello. So I hope my audio is fine. If anyone can do a thumbs up. Perfect. So yeah, I'm a PhD at Technical University of Munich. I'm at my last year right now. And last month, I also joined Flashbots as a incentive researcher. And right now I'm working on, again, on PBS and MEV-related problems, mostly right now focusing on cross-chain MEV, but recently I had a paper on block builder economics, and I guess that's why I'm here today.
Okay, thank you. So next one is Ludwig from Sorella Labs.
Hey everyone, hope you guys can hear me. So I'm CEO co-founder at Sorella Labs. We're working on Angstrom. Angstrom is a protocol and a DEX that is meant to recapture value at the application layer. So basically taking control of the user interaction sequencing directly to recapture sex-dex value and then prevent sandwiching altogether.
Okay, thank you. Now, next we have another speaker from Flashbot. Steven, please.
Folks, I'm Steven. I'm the head of ops and finance at Flashbots and sort of hobbyist on-chain sleuth here, looking at transactions on Eigenfi and Sorella and a bunch of the other tools that folks have built here. So appreciate that. Looking forward to it.
Okay, our next speaker is Yale from Bloxroute, who is the CEO of Bloxroute.
Thank you, everyone. I am from Bloxroute, one of the co-founder with Bloxroute from 2018. So I've been involved with MEV on Ethereum from the start. We focus on the relay side, on supporting and giving services for builders. So very happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Austin from Estes Relay.
Hey there. So yeah, I'm Austin, co-founded Astus, mainly run the mev-boost relay. It's a public good, aiming to just increase the number of relays out there, kind of aiming for maximum neutrality, I suppose. We've expanded to run a number of other just kind of neutral infrastructure in general. But yeah, very interested to stay on top of the mev space.
Okay, thank you. Now our last speaker is Murat. So Murat, would you please accept my invitation as a speaker? Murat, can you hear me? I think something's wrong with Murat's connection. Okay, now I think now we can move on. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Rod, founder and CEO at PrimeMev. We've built Mev Commit. It's doing pre-confirmations. Happy to see everyone here and honored to be among the awesome speaker list.
Awesome. So now everyone has done their self-introduction. Now let's move on to the topic. So our title is like, how do we solve the builder centralization crisis based out using Napkin research? So we do have authors of two great research papers here. So the papers are like definitely like not Napkin research. So my first question is for Professor Fan Zhang, and he's one of the authors for the paper builder centralization market. So Professor Fan Zhang. So my question is like, so your paper reviews the anatomy of builder centralization. So what surprised you most in your findings?
So yeah, so when we several things was quite surprising. I mean, first of all, it was surprising to see how centralized the builder market actually is. I mean, before we did this work, we know it's centralized, but we were surprised at the extent to which the centralization manifests itself through data. I think what is very counterintuitive for me is that, well, you would expect in this market, you would expect the reasons that the consequence of centralization might be that the auction is not competitive enough, in that maybe these builders do not bid all the way up to their true value. So we were expecting that, and so we did the analysis. We looked into the auction data to see what the true value was and what the bid value was. It is surprising to see that actually, vast majority of the auctions, they were competitive in that the winner outbid the true value of the second highest bidder. Yeah, so that was we were not expecting that, and that was like counterintuitive. What's actually happening then is, later we learned that is because of integration. Because of the integration, the true values of different bidders can be drastically different. So the fact that the winner outbid the second highest bidder does not mean that the winner need to bid the most of its value away. And instead, they just need to outbid this second highest bidder slightly. This was quite unexpected, and also it's surprising to see the incentives behind the integration. There's a strong incentive for searchers and builders to form integration because it's better for both of them. I think this is not there's several papers predicting what will happen in a centralized market with specialization and so on. But I think these interesting dynamics was sort of not predicted beforehand, and that's really kind of it's a big problem as well. But it was through our learning, we learned that this thing is the main reason to have this centralized builder market.
Okay, thank you. So my next question is for Burek. So your paper, Who Won Ethereum Blocks and Why, kind of reveals a lot of fascinating patterns in auction outcomes. So what makes certain builders consistently win?
Yeah, so yeah, that's what we also try to understand. And yeah, what I found, or one of the things that I found most fascinating was the relation between the builder's market share and the diversity of order flow that they get, because um, a searcher builder who say only has his own searcher's order flow can like build really profitable blocks, but this is not sustainable because he's dependent on that order flow. So he probably won't win that many blocks. But we saw that builders who had a diverse order flow, who is not dependent on a single source, can then be competitive more frequently because they simply like receive order flow, which make them competitive in more frequent auctions than, say, a searcher builder who is only dependent on that single order flow type. So I would say, yeah, that would be like one of the key things. But then, of course, it again comes down to like you shouldn't just only have diverse order flow, but ideally that should be exclusive order flow, which again, ideally, from the builder's point of view, not shared with other builders, so actually exclusive to you. And that was like one other thing that we try to look into that paper into it in that paper. And yeah, right now I think like another interesting angle to build upon on that paper is that the metrics that we calculated and most of our analysis depend on how we measure builders' profitability, which was dependent on the transaction fees and the direct Coinbase transfers. But this is not actually painting the full picture because, as we show in the paper, there are a lot of payment for order flow deals happening, or builders just have their own searchers, and actually not accounting for this can lead to like um, uh, simply like underestimations or overestimations of builders' profits. And right now we're working on not a paper, but probably a blog post to actually show that if we account for these kind of stuff, the image that we have regarding builder markets could be quite different.
Okay, so it's order flow sources and builder profitability, right? So yeah, I'd also like to point that Eigenfund has done a series of research on social builder integration, and we also reviewed like 3 social builder integrators like out there. And if you guys are interested, please feel free to check out our Substack. So yeah, my next question is like for Ludwig. So your Bronte like provides a great data source for researchers. Like what kind of metrics would you recommend for people who want to do like more builder researches?
I think to kind of echo the point made in terms of looking at costs of order flow, one of the tragic realities in terms of doing true builder research is that the data that you really care about cannot be accessed. In the sense that I think Bronte brought us a bit closer to the full picture in terms of determining, like, basically analyzing the true profit of a block by taking into account the vertically integrated searcher's profit, which kind of paints a very different picture than if you just look at block value as a function of direct rewards from transactions to the builder. But the problem is that a lot of the order flow, specifically Jared's order flow, sandwich heavy order flow, and then end of block back running order flow, those are not like free for the builder, right? They're or directly integrated or there's some form of kickback deal where the builder will pay these order flow providers a portion of the gas or a portion of the block profit. And I can't really think of a way that you can really look at that and estimate that accurately. One thing that we've kind of considered was looking at these unprofitable opportunities and trying to determine the rate that, like the kickback rate that would be necessary to make like the profit look similar to their average profit margins. But that's, I think, very imperfect data there.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, now that we kind of like with all these papers and with this great data sources, so we can understand more about the situation from. So let's hear now from these guys who are really building the infrastructures. So okay, my next question is like for Steven of Flashbot. So how is Flashbot thinking about the implementing like more checks and balances in the builder ecosystem?
Yeah, so when you think about the builder ecosystem right now, I think it's less about checks and balance and more about incentive alignment. Like we definitely, like everyone, I think, recognize the duopoly that's formed in the builder market, and that unless you make some major change to the structure, like it's going to end up centralized. The incentives right now are to aggregate towards those two dominant builders. And we've known for a while, and folks have been talking about the fact that decentralized block building is sort of a necessary condition to get to the outcomes that we want for Ethereum. And so what's exciting is like this particular moment in time, we think we have an opportunity. I think we, the Ethereum community, have an opportunity to use tech that now exists that was not ready for prime time several years ago to actually start to make progress on that decentralized block building idea and really make it work. And so our goal in general is setting up a market structure so that this like order flow dominance that I think several folks have pointed out is sort of the defining characteristic right now actually doesn't end up benefiting like a single block building party, but that it actually gets shipped in a way that benefits the entire user, searcher, builder, validator ecosystem, not just the sort of like dominant builder. And so, Flashbot's had a big announcement last week around BuilderNet and our push to decentralize block building and how we think we should actually go about doing that using some of this new technical infrastructure that exists, where to get to an outcome where end user monetization, system outcomes, censorship resistance, geographic decentralization are now like in a much better spot. So we don't think this is like the only answer to sort of solve these problems, but we do think it's a big step in the right direction.
Okay, cool. So yeah, speaking of market evaluation, let's get another infrastructure provider's perspective. So yeah, my next question is for Yale. So from Blocksprout's perspective, so how has the builder landscape evolved over the past year?
Yeah, so it started right after the merge. The focus was on the technical side. The builders were really competing on the tech side, trying to build a better block. Better block means higher valued block. But very quickly, it's evolved more into an OFA, order flow auction, and right after that into private order flow. But really, the focus is exclusive order flow. So builders, rather than investing on the technology, they start focusing on business development. Okay, they were reaching out to every searcher, every transaction originator, Telegram bot, project, exchanges, and so on, trying to cut deals where order flow will get only to them, and in return they will be able to do some kind of a kickback or some kind of a deal with the transaction originated. That's the focus where we see right now that the builder ecosystem is, and that's what we need to to try to find a good solution, to find a way where builder will not have the incentive to do that, and more important, that the transaction originator will not have the incentive to get into an exclusive agreement with a single builder.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now let's move on to relays. So my next question is for Austin. So how could relay level mechanisms help promote like builder diversity?
So I guess to start, I'll say the good news is that relays are currently not the centralization bottleneck. So builders have to play both sides, and either side could be the limiting factor, but it's clear that order flow is the bigger problem. So in the past, relays have worked mainly through the lens of trying to reduce builder barrier to entry, because there are some hurdles to overcome around having to co-locate with relays, figure out how to handle cancellations, providing optimistic collateral. But I guess the silver lining, these aren't actually the limiting factors right now. So relays are kind of downstream of the main problem. And with relays kind of being pushed into this role of a neutral auctioneer who doesn't pick winners and losers, it kind of makes it difficult to take an opinionated stance. And that is an image that ASTIS likes to embrace. I think there is an angle through which relays can allow for greater expression of validator preferences beyond just profit maximization, which is maybe kicking the can down the road and saying it's someone else's problem. But ultimately, if the proposer has monopoly power of their block to the extent that relays can better implement systems to allow validators to express preferences and influence the builder market with the relay as kind of a neutral pass-through entity, there's potential there to have validators provide some input here. Other than that, I think relays, well, ASTIS at least is happy to see some order flow from decentralized builders start to come in, and hopefully all the work in keeping relays kind of independent, not making deals with either side, means that these blocks from decentralized builders will be treated the same as blocks from any other builders. There'll be no prioritization going on there.
Okay, cool. Very interesting. So, okay, now we have heard about like this kind of infrastructure related stuff. Now I think we can dive into like protocol level innovation. So yeah, we have our last speaker here, Murad. So he's been building in this space. So like, what kind of technical innovation could level the playing field for new builders? And is there any like current EIPs that you might regard would be helpful for the current situation?
Yeah, I think we're in some sort of consensus over here that order flow is the kind of the crux of it all, which I believe begs the question, like, why don't we do more to democratize order flow? And you can argue that there are some efforts for this, but essentially, like, there are mechanisms that the protocol can implement at the consensus level or execution level, layer level, where you can say, okay, well, if at least 3 nodes have seen this transaction, then the gas for it will be lower or something, right? So, like, essentially, if this is a decentralized transaction in that the source of this order flow is not exclusive, or it has gone through multiple entities in some shape or form, then the protocol could treat that differently. Meaning, hey, look, there's a price for decentralization that Ethereum is willing to pay. And here's the price, and here is how we're rewarding that to you, Mr. Order Flow Generator. I think what current solutions kind of disregard is particularly this. But I do also see, for example, Flashbots is like latest solution and announcement, but BuilderNet trying to address this in some shape or form. But I do believe this approach also favors those who generate their own order flow, and, like, for example, block builders that make a lot of their revenue from their own order flow versus block builders that make their revenue through building the actual blocks rather than having their own order flow. So it basically gives advantage to entities that are more searcher heavy Whereas, if you're a neutral block builder, for example, it tries to kind of disintermediate all of your services and your revenue and give it entirely to the order flow generator. So I think it's imperative that we find kind of protocol mechanisms that balance these so that we can have a healthy marketplace of both those who source order flow and have their own kind of searching flow, but also those who are able to provide like neutral services to the system, which are disincentivized from like abusing those powers.
Okay, cool. All right. So yeah, now we can move to the kind of like open mic part. I would like to start with a kind of like a thought experiment. Like, if we can start from scratch today, so how would you like to design the incentive for builders? So any of the speakers here who are interested in giving their 2 cents, so please feel free to speak.
I'll start based on what I just said. There should have been some sort of decentralization factor in the function that outputs value. Today, it's a pure economic value, and clearly the market cares more than just the pure economics. Although if you ask the validator, you might get different answers from different folks. But clearly there's a premium that we're all considering here for decentralization. And the elephant in the room is that the Ethereum is not currently paying this premium, but demanding that the market kind of move its way. And I believe all sorts of systems, including ones that are being deployed recently, like need to consider this to some degree. Like the reason we have centralization with order flow in the TradFi market is because there's no, like, this premium does not exist because they don't care. So they're like, okay, I'm going to centralize more. So wherever more order flow comes from is going to reap more benefits. So if we want to encourage more decentralization, we should encourage more decentralization of order flow. And that could very well happen through incentives around metrics around decentralization.
Just jumping in here. I think I quite maybe a bit of a radical perspective here. In my opinion, the problem of centralization, like builder centralization specifically, arises from the inherent value of that order flow. And yes, like some builders have an advantage through non-toxic order flow, where you have, like these Telegram bots that have a deal with a builder, and that generates quite a bit of value. But if we're looking at, the top 2 builders, one of them is dominating because of extractive flow. And so, in my opinion, it's not so much about redesigning the builder incentives, but more so about reducing the value of the extractive order flow and basically designing better applications so that the leakage is prevented from like in the first place. Where you can imagine a scenario in which most of the apps capture basically all of their MEV and redistribute it to their users, and then the rest of the order flow is not really that valuable. And so then the advantage and like the incentive in being a builder is nowhere near as high. So, critics could probably argue that will probably push the centralization to the app layer, and I'd mostly agree with that, but I don't think that's necessarily as big of a problem. Because if the apps, are centralized by, virtue of there being extreme demand for a very specific app, that is no longer a concern of the protocol and doesn't like have systematic like ecosystemic risks for the entire blockchain, right? If like a app becomes 99% of the order flow for Ethereum, if the builders are neutral and there's no censorship and there's a decentralized set of builders, that doesn't really matter.
This is Eyal. I want to take it actually completely to the other side. Again, it's a radical idea. The biggest problem that I think that we have today with PBS, it's PBS itself. So the concept of PBS was, let's try to make sure that validator will be able to run a validator node regardless of their infrastructure, regardless of their region, hardware, location. So block builders is a very complicated task. So we are going to separate it from the validator itself. But we're seeing now that it's not that complicated. And if we would actually not do PBS and each validator will create their own block, I think we will not have this issue at all. So that's similar to what Ludwig said on the app side. We can think about a solution where we just simply don't have builder, and of course, at that point, we are not going to have any centralization issue.
Yeah, I think they're somewhat like complementary in terms of like I agree with that approach, but I think for like a default like vanilla, block building / bundle merging algorithm to work, you need like the value of that exclusive order flow to basically be zero, right? Where like the loss is very small and there's not that much of an incentive to outsource it to this super specialized actor. But I agree, in like a world where MEV extraction is very low on the protocol side, you can kind of get rid of the builder role altogether.
Yeah, what's interesting is I think there's sort of a whole bunch of people attacking a similar place, like ending up in a similar place, but attacking it from different angles. I think there's like, even at Flashbots, like we think that in the medium term, there won't necessarily be like a block builder entity the way that we think about it today. It's going to be just like a different system where the people running builder tech today, but searchers, order flow providers, apps, etc., are working in a much more collaborative fashion to like build blocks that get adopted. And so the like builder role itself is like this discrete entity that feels like a middleman in this process. Doesn't necessarily need to exist in the way that it does today. In a much more distributed system, you would view the sort of like block merging, block building tech as like a utility tech that gets run in a much more decentralized way. So I think it's not even necessarily at odds with some of the things that you all are talking about. It's like you can see a world where this tech is used in a fashion that's very different from the market structure that you see today.
But would that actually be different, Stephen? Because wouldn't that tip the scale towards whoever's contributing the most valuable order flow?
Well, I mean, we heard someone else, I forget who exactly, saying like if apps capture most of their own order flow, like is it a problem? Like if you are contributing the most valuable order flow, should you get the most valuable rewards? Like that feels like a reasonable conclusion. But like it's actually your flow that has the value. So yeah.
I agree with that, but I don't see how that's different from builder centralization. That's just kind of just moving the needle to somewhere else, basically.
I guess it's
if you
collaborative.
have a mechanism that, if you like collaborate and help get the value of that flow back to the originator, then like the builder doesn't necessarily capture it all in a centralized way. Like you pay some network operator to run an instance of this like decentralized tech, but not as a, that has to be competitive rather than the winner take all that happens right now.
But it's not winner take all that happens right now. They're still competing with each other, right?
But there's one person that gets to build the entire block. So if you
but what I'm trying to argue here is it seems the same to me. It's just that there's one large order flow provider that's going to dictate the block in this case.
I mean, if those transactions are mutually exclusive, yes, but I don't necessarily see how in this paradigm they would be, right? And I do empathize with like the fact that builders as like an entity could be extremely useful if they were trustless, especially from like an app developer's perspective. As an app, you don't know like the exact state of the block, so that can cause problems. So if you have like hooks integrated with builders, you can kind of react just in time when there's a state change, and then make sure that whatever transaction you want to execute goes through. And so there's definitely some value, I'd say, in having builders. But the problem today is that like as apps, you don't get any say in what goes on. Whereas if we could have specialized logic to handle things slightly differently, that'd be extremely useful.
Yeah, to follow on what Steven said, I mean, there's a recent paper by Christoph Schlegel from Flashbots called "On Sybil-Proof Mechanisms," and there it simply shows that if we want to have a Sybil-proof incentive-compatible mechanism, um, and if there are private values, then it's inevitable that there will be centralization, and the one who has access to the most private value will always win the auction, which is the case in PBS today. And if this is inevitable, given that we desire these properties, then we need to simply, we can't escape the monopoly, but we can try to escape the monopolist, which is, I guess, what Flashpost tries to do with BuilderNet, or simply converging towards this collaborative block building, or block building inside a TEE. And I guess, given PBS, given these properties, this is a valid way to approach the inevitable centralization.
I'm wondering if some element of randomization for order flow routing would be kind of a more powerful mechanic here than let's say there's 3 builder net nodes, and by some random factor only 2 of them will get some order flow, or let's say there's 2 builder net nodes and 1 non-builder net builder, and Ethereum mempool kind of selectively sends them based on the RANDAO output or something, because that could essentially direct order flow in a kind of a more democratized way, where you won't always get the order flow if you're the top builder or something. And that would then apply similarly to even if you have your own order flow and it's the most juicy order flow, that you would kind of still have to use the system in order to route your order flow to get on chain. Would love to hear people's thoughts on something like that.
I think this sounds like something that would be useful in the existing paradigm of dApps, where because of the purely on-chain design, where there's no off-chain processing and bundling, or app-specific sequencing, there's extreme value in these transactions. But as dApps most likely evolve towards a state where they're internalizing a lot of that value before those user transactions or order flow become full-fledged transactions, I don't really see that much value in distributing that randomly, because all the app cares about is that it gets included in a timely fashion, and it is cheap, is executed for as cheap as possible. I think where the randomization makes sense is if this order flow has some value to be extracted. And I think naturally, we shouldn't set that as an assumption of the system and a desirable property, because it isn't. It originates from a fundamental design flaw from some of these DeFi apps that are leaking that value. And so in that sense, I don't really see why we should randomize it.
Essentially, are you saying that if all mev flow was kind of app distributed today, then we wouldn't care as much about one builder building all the blocks, because the value would be extracted upstream? Because your point seems to make the claim, if I understand it correctly, that builder centralization isn't an issue as long as the mev is being distributed equitably.
No, I'm saying, well, to some extent that I'd argue is true, but I'd say builder centralization is a product of extremely valuable order flow and its exclusivity because of the complexity in the operation, right? It's very hard to do sextex very effectively. It's very hard to sandwich very effectively. So if all of those attacks or extractive behaviors are handled directly at the app level, where that value gets recaptured in bulk by the application itself and then redistributed to its users, the remaining order flow is just the transaction, which is the outcome of the app, right? But that's just like a baseline state transition. There's not that much value because it's all been handled at the app level. And so then you're in a scenario where this value of order flow is extremely small, and it's just about including it in the cheapest way possible. And it's not about, oh, there's a 50 ETH arbitrage that, will make Beaver build always win this block, as opposed to like some random build.
Yeah, I mean, the builder still has a first, or last look advantage, though, right? Because he sees what your app state is going to update to before everybody else.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't really matter in this context for apps that would be designed to prevent that, right? Like, if you're an app that is doing a recapture mechanism, you ensure that there's no bypassability, so the builder can't like use that information and then leverage it to do something. But that's where like TE builders would be super useful, is that you have this guarantee that there isn't like any malicious code or like extractive strategy that tries to grief your bundle or do that sort of thing.
Well, the malicious actor in that case is a T attacker instead of the builder. So I think it just disintermediates the role rather than eliminate it.
I mean, it makes it a fair bit more complicated, right?
Depends. I live 30 minutes from an Intel factory, for example.
Yeah, I think considering the time, we can move on to the next question. So next question is like we have this like new proposals like execution tickets, and also the BuilderNet just published by Flashbot and other builders. Also there is stuff like encrypting mempools that proposed by Shutter Networks. So which one of this would do you guys like, and which one do you think is has the best hope to be like integrating into the current Ethereum?
Sorry, could you repeat the options?
Execution tickets, a BuilderNet, encrypted mempools, and any other proposal that you think that's valuable.
Well, I personally is a big fan of encrypting mempool, although it's facing a lot of practical challenges, like how do you charge fees and so on. But I think if the like peer-to-peer network was designed to have more privacy guarantees, then a lot of the extractive behaviors can be prevented, from the very beginning. Yeah, but I'm also a big fan of BuilderNet. But I actually see BuilderNet to have more potential to get deployed because encrypting mempools seem to have a lot of other challenges as well.
Yeah, basically same position there. I think encrypted mempools would be an ideal, but yeah, a lot of technical complexity. But I think BuilderNet would definitely be a step in the right direction there.
Yeah, same here. I think encrypted mempool has an issue also with quite a lot of proposer validator that want to make sure that their blocks are in compliance with their regulation, which with encrypted mempool, that's a little bit hard to achieve. And BuilderNet, I think, has a lot of promise. The main concern that I have with BuilderNet is to make sure that, that's what I said earlier, that the originator of a very good or very value order flow will have the incentive to use the BuilderNet and not work with a builder that is not part of the BuilderNet, because then we did not achieve anything. Those builders still have the major advantage because of the high order flow, and still win the block. And it's a catch-22. If they still have a very high block space, transaction originator who are willing to bribe a lot in order to get into the next block are forced to use them and not forced to use something just like BuilderNet because they want to get into the next block. So by doing that, we still give them the power to build the best block and to continue to win. And the last point is just about those solutions that are trying to find a solution for the centralization of the builder are doing so with the concept of let's open up the builder space and let's do an automatic kickback of value to the order flow originator, but we keep forgetting that it's in this case it's one big pile of MEV. If we are taking some of the MEV and give it back to the user, the proposer in this case or the builder, of course, is losing. And my concern is that we are going to get to the point where the proposers, the validator, will start to feel that too much value are being kept at the originator, and their block value is continuing to go down, and then they will simply start rejecting BuilderNet and start rejecting block from any other builder that is capturing too much value either for themselves or back to the user, and that basically means that all those solutions will fail.
I think it's worth just pointing out that like a lot of these things are not necessarily mutually exclusive either. So like you could have some version of execution tickets or inclusion lists stuff alongside some of these other options. So yeah, I mean, certainly I think nobody loves the current structure. And so all of these in some form or fashion could represent an improvement.
I would second that. The combination of these protocols would be ultimately very powerful, and even if we have some sort of awesome protocol that ends up kind of dominating, like then we have protocol risk, right? Like, so ultimately the builder market would probably be the most decentralized if there were maybe 2-3 builder nets that were competing with various ways, because we want to like surface the best value and have the most amount of competition, and that probably includes the protocol level.
I'm not confident that the value being generated there would justify the infrastructure cost and human capital cost. In a world where, there's very little value on the table, builders are, fighting to the absolute margin, why would there be so many networks, It seems like this would almost have to be subsidized, because in an efficient market, like in an efficient DeFi, there wouldn't be that much value leaked to these builders.
Yeah, but like in the same way Ethereum subsidizes validators, for example, with the issuance, there could be a similar mechanism for builders to provide this service, and contribute some sort of decentralization of the stack.
Okay, I think it's time to move on to the last question. So we have this a Twitter user called Dave Phelps, who knows a lot about all the flows. And a few days ago, he said that these two builders happen to be the best and building the most valuable block. But there are dozens of other less performant block builders. If Titan or Beaver went offline, so those non-competitive builders would now be more competitive and happy to scoop up the profit left in the void and continuing to build blocks just fine. So I'd like to ask your guys' response to this. Like, if really Titan or Beaver just went offline, do you think the other builders gonna kind of take their position?
So I do have like a pretty strong reaction to this. I don't know if it is the same as everyone else, but I feel like it like borderline intentionally misses the point, which is like, yes, of course, if one of them dropped, actually what would happen is the other one would probably take all of the share. But regardless of that, like that's not really the concern, is like what happens if one of them leaves. The bigger concern is what happens if one of them dominates and then has to have a censorship regime that's based on wherever they are. And so like the point here of what happens if one disappears is like not the case that we're trying to hedge against. The case is that we're trying to hedge against is that they actually dominate completely, and then they have to censor in a certain way, and that's like much worse than someone disappearing. So like I feel like the premise is just a little bit flawed.
Yeah, I want to agree with Stefan and just emphasize this. First of all, I don't think that if one of them goes down, the second one will get it, because I think since they are competing, the order flow that one is getting will probably go to the rest of the builders. So if one of them goes down for a day, for example, you're going to see the second one probably get 10 or 20% more, but the rest of the builder will get the rest of the 20 or 30%. But if one of them goes down forever, then I agree with you. But the major issue for me, again, you have to remember who are the order flow originators. Send them the order flow. They want inclusion in the next block. The reason why they sign exclusive order flow with one of them is because they know that there is a very good chance that the builder that they sign the order flow will get into the next block, or will make sure that they will get into the next block with other builder. If Titan or Beaver will somehow get to 60 or 70% themselves, we're going to see other originator that are using the second builder switching to either Titan or Beaver, and from 60, 70%, they're going to jump to 80, 90%. This is the biggest issue I think that we have today. For me, the fact that they have together 95%, but they very evenly distributed, it's not as bad as one of them will have 80% and the second one will have 10%. Then it's really going to be a crisis.
I think one thing I'd add to that is like, I disagree with the notion that it's solely timely inclusion. I think most of these deals are about rebates, where there's an excess in value, like block value, and the builder can land the block with a large profit and redistribute that excess value back to the participants, back to like those order flow providers.
Yeah.
So I think it's mostly concerned about like capturing that additional value.
This is all true, but they still care about next block. Most of them are. The reason why I know, because Blockstrat provide a service like this, so I know what the customers are telling us. They want next block inclusion. Who are the user of those order flow? It's like, think about sniping as an example. Okay, sniping, you have crazy bundles that are paying high amount in order to be the first to snipe a token. This must have an inclusion in the next block. It's not something that the app can capture. It's just simply people that are willing to pay for inclusion. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but I hear you there. Like, definitely agree that number one priority is timely inclusion. But I guess my point on value distribution and share is that now that these builders have provided these deals where they're rebating that value, the user base has become aware of the underlying economics. And so in a scenario where the top one builder drops out, I think it is actually very likely that the second builder will completely dominate, more so than before, and those other like builders that are lower tier will be left completely in the dust. For the simple reason that, as someone who previously received rebates, I will naturally go to the second most competitive builder, which is now the most competitive builder, because they can provide more excess and more redistributed value to me, because they're more competitive in getting their blocks included, because they already have so much other order flow that is, contributing to the value of the block.
Yeah, I 100% in agreement. That's why I said I called it short term and long term. If one builder now is going to go down for 1 day or 2 days, we're not going to see originator changing their app and submitting to a different builder. So for 1 or 2 days, we're going to see the rest of the builders starting to get momentum. But if one of them are permanently close down their shop, of course, it's going to go to the second one. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, no, I think I misunderstood then, but yeah, seems like we're aligned.
Yeah, something that is just like a curiosity to me based on both of the points that you all have made is just, as far as I know, Flashbots is the only one who's doing permissionless refunds like this, and that you can send to us and be eligible for a refund. And everyone, more or less, is now pretty good at ensuring inclusion, regardless of whether you're going to win the block or not. And so it's just curious to me to see the exclusive deals, the structure that exists today, because I actually think like the Flashbots refund mechanism is super beneficial for a lot of people, and it's just like not that widely known. And so that has been like an interesting observation as I've been doing these threads, every day for a month or whatever. That there's a whole bunch of situations where people miss an opportunity and actually just like give a whole bunch of free money to Beaver or Titan or whoever.
Yeah, so you're welcome to look at our program, so I can send you information how we are doing the rebate, and yeah.
Okay, I think it's already been an hour, so I think I'm going to wrap up. So, big thank you for all the speakers today. You guys gave very good and very interesting points for everybody to think about. So I think also that builder centralization is definitely something that's going to be like hanging in our mind for a pretty long time, and hopefully one day we can find out some kind of solution to avoid being hijacked by these top 2 builders. All right, that's it. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. And stay tuned for our next MEV space.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.